Hello everyone. Before we dive in, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're from and what time you're watching. This helps YouTube show you more stories like this one. Now let's get started. I remember being 4 years old and not understanding anything except the pieces adults dropped around me. I only knew my dad was gone, and he wasn't supposed to be. The house felt bigger without him, like someone had pulled the center out of it. Every room felt stretched and hollow, as if the walls were learning how to echo. My mom kept moving around like she was trying to stay ahead of something. Always tidying, always pacing, always checking the phone as if she was waiting for it to wake up and change everything. Most days blurred together, but I remember the night my mom told me we were going out to look for him again. She packed snacks because she knew I'd complain, and she grabbed the big folded map she kept on the counter, the one that always stayed open to the states around us. Even at 4, I noticed the corners starting to fray from how many times she folded and unfolded it. She traced the roads with her finger every time, like she was trying to memorize the shape of loss. I sat in the back seat, feet not even close to reaching the floor, watching the world outside change from familiar houses to long empty roads. I didn't understand why we were going to new places. I thought missing people stayed where you lost them. I didn't know back then that someone walking away in confusion can become a trail that stretches across states, cities, and lonely highways. The first time I saw the Ingalls store, it felt like I had crossed into a different world. We didn't have one in my town, so seeing that giant sign made my chest tighten. I thought it meant we had traveled too far, that maybe we had left the place where my dad could be found. The store was huge to my 4-year-old eyes, bright red letters glowing like something important. I pressed my forehead against the window and stared until it disappeared in the mirror. Even now, whenever I see an Ingalls, something small inside me sinks, like a memory tugging at the back of my ribs. In the days before he left, he had started acting strangely, but I was too young to understand any of it. I only remember the way his face changed, how his eyes stayed wide for too long, how he walked through the house like he was listening for something no one else could hear. I knew something was wrong, but at that age, wrong things didn't have names. They just made the air feel thin and hard to breathe. My mom tried to keep things normal, but I could feel her worry everywhere. She barely slept. I would find her sitting on the couch before the sun came up, staring at nothing, hands clasped tight like she was praying silently. Sometimes she rubbed her forehead so much it turned red. She didn't want me to know how scared she was, but fear slips through cracks no one notices. 4 months after he disappeared, they found his truck in another state. I didn't know what states were yet, but I could tell by the look on my mom's face that they were far, far away. The truck was partly wrecked, sitting crooked like it had given up. My mom sat at the kitchen table when she got the news, pressing her fingers to her mouth, breathing hard but making no sound. I watched her from the doorway holding one of the kittens our outside cat had just had. I used to pick them up and bring them to her to try and help. Even though their nails scratched my arms, sometimes she would hold one without speaking, just keeping her eyes shut like she needed something warm to hold on to. She thought he was dead. She never said the words to me, but I saw it. She carried the thought like something heavy tied to her. Every morning she looked older. Every afternoon she moved slower. Every night she stayed awake longer than before. When they found him many months later, he was walking along an interstate in another direction entirely. He had no jacket, no wallet. His belongings sat in a neat little pile in the left lane, like someone had arranged them with purpose. His steps were slow, like he was trying to remember each one. They said he looked lost and tired, like his mind had taken him somewhere far away and only his body had found its way back. When he finally came home, I clung to him. For days, I held onto his leg whenever he walked anywhere, even from one room to another. I would not let go because I felt that if I did, he might vanish again. I didn't understand his illness then, but I understood fear, and mine filled every corner of me. I watched him constantly, checking that he was still there, still solid, still alive. He fixed his medication after that, and things slowly got better. He became steady again, calm again, the version of him I remembered before everything cracked open. He worked hard, loved us hard, lived carefully like he was afraid of the fault lines inside himself. Years passed, and he was always there. He never left again, but the fear stayed with me longer. It hid in small places. When he walked out to get the mail, my chest would tighten until he came back inside. When he drove anywhere without me or my mom, I watched the clock like it was counting beats of danger. It took years to understand that he wasn't choosing to leave. His mind had betrayed him, but he fought his way back. The hardest part now is knowing he still feels guilty. Even after all these years, he carries that weight like a stone in his pocket. He thinks he broke something in us that can't be fixed. But the truth is, he came back. He fought through something invisible, something strong enough to steal months from him, and he still came home. That matters more than the fear ever did. It took me a long time to understand it, but I see it clearly now. The real horror wasn't him leaving. It was how hard the world is on people who are fighting battles inside their own heads. It was watching someone I loved suffer, because no one talked enough about the things that twist a mind out of place. It was realizing how fast life can turn into something unrecognizable. But the ending is simple. He made it back. Our family survived. We learned how to talk about things that used to stay buried. And I learned that real monsters aren't creatures or shadows. Sometimes they're illnesses that go unnoticed until they break something open. But even then, people can come back from it. My dad did. And that's what stays with me now. Stronger than the fear ever was, he came home, and he stayed. I remember the lights first. They were sharp and white, cutting straight through my eyelids as if my head had been opened to the sky. I didn't know where I was or how I got there. I didn't even know that the shape under me was a stretcher. All I knew was that everything around me felt too clean, too bright, too quiet in a way that didn't feel safe. My body felt small and heavy at the same time, like I had been asleep for years. A nurse leaned over me. I didn't know her name, but I can still picture her face. Curly blonde hair pulled back in a way that left a few loose strands around her cheeks. Bright red lipstick that looked too bold for a place full of white walls and metal carts. She kept checking me again and again, moving around me fast, her hands steady but her eyes worried. I didn't understand why she was so tense. I didn't understand anything. I only knew that something was wrong, and everyone except me seemed to know exactly what it was. I couldn't talk. There was a tube down my throat, and the pressure of it made my whole body tighten when I breathed. I gagged once or tried to, and the feeling was sharp and helpless. Even at 5 years old, something in me locked up from that sensation, and that fear never really went away. Every time she gave me another shot, the cold needle sliding into my arm, I tried to make her laugh. It didn't make sense to me why she looked so serious, so afraid. I didn't understand pain or danger the way an adult does. I only knew that she looked like she needed something lighter. So I would roll my eyes back and pretend to pass out, letting my head drop and my body go limp before opening my eyes with a small muffled laugh. She smiled every time. But even then I could tell it was the kind of smile someone wears when they're trying to hide something bigger. My dad kept coming into the room. He didn't walk in normally. He burst in, almost crashing through the door, chest rising and falling fast. His face was pale, and there was a jittery shake in his hands. I remember the way he scanned the room each time, eyes jumping from the machines to the nurse to me, and then he'd disappear again. At the time, I didn't understand why he didn't stay. I wondered if I was in trouble, or if I had done something wrong. Later, I learned that my sister was in the room next to mine, and he was running back and forth between us, trying to figure out where to stand, who needed him more, what to do. He couldn't choose. There was no right answer. I was told years later that my heart had stopped 9 times. I don't remember any of it. I don't remember fading out or slipping away or anything dramatic. I remember the lights. I remember the sharp cold of the metal under my back. I remember the nurse's face. But I don't remember dying. It's strange to know something happened to you, but to feel no connection to it, except through other people's stories. It almost feels like it happened to a different kid. When the truth finally came to me, it didn't come all at once. At first, I was told something simple, that my mother had been sick, that she had a break from reality and something went wrong, that she didn't know what she was doing, that it wasn't her fault. This was easier for everyone to say. It wrapped the memory in a soft blanket. It let people breathe. But soft blankets don't last forever. As I grew older, pieces came out in casual conversations, in arguments, in slips of the tongue. Nothing outright at first. Just odd comments, pauses, looks exchanged between relatives when certain subjects came up. Slowly, I started understanding more than anyone intended me to. The idea that she had a psychotic break felt too neat, too convenient, like a story patched together to stop me from looking too closely. I didn't question it because I didn't want to. The truth sat below everything like a weight I wasn't ready to lift. It took 20 years before anyone finally explained it without filters. There was no episode, no sudden madness, no snap in her mind that made her lose grip on reality. She knew exactly what she was doing. The pills weren't hers for some medical need. They were a weapon she chose. She had a reason, even if it was twisted beyond understanding. She wanted to hurt my dad. She wanted to punish him for drinking, for arguing with her, for whatever anger she held and let grow. She didn't want him to recover from it. She didn't care that my sister and I were only children, barely old enough to understand the world outside our own homes. She didn't care what might happen to us afterward. We were leverage, and she used us without hesitation. Learning that reshaped the hospital memory into something colder, something sharper. The bright lights didn't feel harmless anymore. The nurse's worried eyes made more sense. My dad's panic became clearer. Even the way the stretcher felt under my back now matched the reality of what had happened. My mother had made a choice, and that choice came within minutes of ending both our lives. Sometimes I try to recall anything from the moment before the hospital. A smell, a sound, a room, even a color. I try to see whether my younger self sensed something was wrong. But there's nothing. Just a blank space that begins and ends with the lights above me. As an adult, I understand things differently. I understand fear and anger and resentment. I understand how people break apart in slow ways. I understand addiction and frustration and conflict between parents. But nothing in that understanding excuses what she did. Nothing makes it reasonable or forgivable. You don't give children pills to win an argument. You don't put their lives on the line to make a point. When someone crosses that line, there is no coming back in the same way. The strange thing is that I survived, and so did my sister, but the memory doesn't feel like survival. It feels like a story that tries to hide itself. It feels like a moment that never fully belonged to me, because I was too small to understand it. But the more I learned, the more the pieces fit together, and the picture stopped changing. I don't remember much from when I was 3, but this one memory has stayed with me in a strange, blurry way, like a bruise that never fully goes away. I only remember bits of the day itself, but the fear, the noise, the feeling of being trapped, those parts stayed sharp in my head for years, even when everything else from that age faded. And the older I got, the more the missing pieces filled themselves in through what I had been told later. Somehow, the mix of my tiny childhood memory and the details I learned as an adult made the whole thing even more disturbing. It was just a normal day. My mom had taken me out shopping, and I remember being excited because I was allowed to sit in the front seat. Back then, I thought it meant I was older than I really was. Just sitting there made me feel important, like I was helping her drive, even though I could barely see over the dashboard. I can still picture the sunlight hitting the windshield in a warm, soft way. The car smelled like the air freshener she kept clipped to the vents. This fake vanilla scent that stuck to everything. We were stopped at a red light on some regular road. Nothing special about it. To our right was a hotel with this half-empty parking lot. I didn't care about any of that at the time. I remember kicking my shoes together and looking at my tiny hands, just being a kid. Mom was waiting for the light to turn green. Everything was calm, almost boring. But then it happened so fast. Even now it's like my mind splits into two versions of the moment. One version is what I actually remember. A sudden jolt that felt like the whole world jumped sideways. I didn't even understand it at first. Then this crushing pressure slammed into my right side, and the door shoved against my leg so hard I couldn't move. The second version is what I learned later. That some impatient woman waiting in the parking lot got fed up with sitting for a few seconds and decided to floor her car straight into us. She wasn't even supposed to be moving. She was supposed to be waiting just like everyone else. But her patience snapped like it meant nothing, and she took it out on our car. The sound is what I remember most. Not the crash itself, but the sound right after. The grinding metal, the shudder of the door, the sudden silence that never feels like real quiet. I couldn't breathe properly for a few seconds. The seatbelt dug into me. My leg was stuck between the seat and the door, and I remember trying to pull it free, but it wouldn't move. I started panicking. I didn't understand anything except that everything hurt, and the world didn't feel safe anymore. I don't remember crying, but I know I did because every adult later said I was screaming. I only remember this overwhelming heat building up in my face, like I was trapped in a small oven, and my chest feeling too tight. My mom was next to me, but I couldn't even turn my head to look at her. I didn't know if she was okay. I didn't know if I was okay. I was 3 years old, and suddenly the car felt like a metal box that was squeezing around me. The firefighters showed up, but back then they felt like giants. I remember the sound of their boots on the pavement. Heavy, rhythmic, sure. I didn't understand who they were or what they were doing. I just remember the vibration of metal tools against the door as they worked to free me. One of them kept shifting the seat and pulling the edge of the door back until my legs slid out, and the moment it came free I felt this rush of air like the car had been holding its breath too. They lifted me out carefully. I remember their gloves being cold, even though the day wasn't. The outside world looked too bright, too loud. The cars passing by, the smell of gas, the broken pieces of plastic on the road. It all felt wrong. Like the world had changed while I was stuck in the car, and now everything looked unfamiliar. I didn't know what happened to the woman who hit us. I didn't know she had been laying on the horn at us before hitting us. I didn't know she was angry enough to crash into a car with a child in it. All I knew was my leg hurt and I wanted to go home. They checked me to make sure nothing was broken. I was lucky. My leg was red and sore, but nothing serious. My mom had some bruises. The car didn't look too bad from the outside, which is strange because inside it felt like a disaster. Someone told me I could sit in a police car, maybe to calm me down, maybe to distract me. I remember sitting in the back seat of it, looking at all the buttons and lights, not understanding anything but feeling a little bit proud, because it felt special. It's weird how kids find the smallest things exciting, even in the middle of something terrifying. Years later I learned more about what happened, and that's when the whole thing changed for me. The woman who crashed into us tried to blame my mom for the accident. She claimed she did nothing wrong. She tried to make it sound like we were the ones at fault. I didn't know any of this as a kid, but as an adult hearing it, it made my skin crawl. The only reason her lie didn't work was because there happened to be a police officer in the next lane who saw everything. He watched her hit us. He saw the way she sped forward out of impatience. Without him, who knows what she would have tried to claim. I was also told I didn't want to ride in a car for a while after that. I don't remember that part. Trauma sticks in strange ways. Some pieces fade and some stay sharp. I didn't grow up terrified of cars or anything like that. But every once in a while, when a car pulls too close to the side I'm sitting on, I feel this strange pressure in my leg. Not pain, just memory. Like my body remembers even when my mind doesn't want to. The ending of that day wasn't dramatic. There were no big scenes or lessons. We went home eventually. My legs stopped hurting after a few days. Life kept going. But that moment stuck itself deep in me. It taught me, even at that age, that danger doesn't always come from dark places or scary shadows or strangers in the night. Sometimes it comes from a bright, normal day, from a person you never met, from someone who simply loses their patience for 5 seconds and lets their anger become a weapon. And even though everything turned out fine in the end, and even though I walked away without real injury, I still remember that feeling of being trapped and helpless. It made me understand later in life how thin the line is between normal and disaster. That day didn't ruin anything for me. It didn't haunt me constantly. But it stayed, quietly, in the back of my mind. And sometimes that's what makes something truly scary. The fact that it really happened, that it was ordinary until the moment it wasn't, and that all it took to change everything was one reckless person and 1 second of impact that I can still feel decades later. I got home early from school that day, earlier than I ever had before. I remember the air outside being a little warmer than usual, the kind of warm that made the sidewalks smell like hot dust and dry leaves. I was about 9, still small enough that my backpack felt oversized, and my house felt too quiet when no one else was in it. My parents were out at work, and my brother and sister were at their high school clubs. I didn't think much of it. I liked having the house to myself sometimes. It felt like everything slowed down and settled around me when it was just me and the familiar rooms. I placed my backpack near the stairs and walked into the living room, thinking I'd grab a snack and watch some TV. The house felt still in a way that felt normal back then. Nothing strange, nothing wrong. Just the usual late afternoon silence. I remember hearing the fridge hum and the faint ticking of the old hallway clock. I didn't even get to open the fridge before the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly kind of ring. It was quick and sharp, like whoever was out there didn't want to wait. I froze for a moment because I wasn't expecting anyone. But I walked to the door anyway and pulled it open. My neighbor was standing there. She lived a few houses down, the older woman with the neat yard and the always trimmed hedges. She wasn't smiling, and she wasn't relaxed. Her arms were stiff, and she was holding something. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was a plastic storage container, the kind people used to keep toys in or clothes for the summer. And inside it was my cat. She was curled strangely, her body shivering in small, broken movements. She let out this soft, painful sound that barely even sounded like a meow, more like the last scrap of energy she had. Her fur was messy and wrong, flattened in places and sticking out in others. There was dirt on her face, and her breathing was uneven, almost sponge-like, wet and shallow. Her eyes weren't shining like they usually did. They were half open and dull. I didn't understand at first. I didn't think anything bad could have happened to her. She was the kind of cat that wandered everywhere and always came back fine. Nothing ever scared her or slowed her down. But the woman looked at me in a way that told me something was very, very off. She didn't say anything. She just handed me the container, and I felt the weight of it hit my hands. Not just the weight of my cat inside it, but the weight of what must have happened to her. I felt a sick heaviness in my stomach the moment I touched it. I carried her inside and put the container on the carpet near the sofa. The plastic felt cold. I kept thinking it should be warm because she was in it, but somehow it felt colder than the rest of the room. I knelt down and looked at her through the clear sides. Every small movement she made felt like something sharp poking into my chest. I went to the phone by the wall and tried calling my dad first. No answer. Then my mom. No answer. My brother. No answer. My sister. Nothing. The phone felt heavier each time I put it down and picked it back up. It was the kind of helpless frustration only a kid feels when the adults are unreachable. Like the whole world is ignoring the one moment you desperately need someone. I tried calling the house of a family friend, who sometimes drove us places. No one picked up. Then I tried another neighbor, but they weren't home either. I kept dialing number after number, my fingers shaking a little because time felt weird. It felt like everything was moving too slowly and too fast at the same time. This was before everyone had cell phones. Before you could call someone and know they'd answer. If someone wasn't home, they just weren't reachable. And that was it. I finally ran outside to see if anyone on the street was pulling in or leaving or walking their dog. But the street was empty. The kind of empty that made the late afternoon feel almost hollow. Just parked cars, dry leaves scraping across the pavement, and a faint sound of someone mowing their lawn in the distance. I went back inside, breathing hard. My hands felt sweaty. I walked to the container again and lifted the lid just a little, just enough to reach in and touch her. Her fur was warm, but in a fading way, like the warmth wasn't coming from her anymore. She looked at me, but the look wasn't the way she usually looked. It was unfocused and scared, like she didn't understand what was happening to her. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help her. I was 9. I couldn't drive. I couldn't carry her all the way to the vet across town. I kept pacing the living room, listening for the phone to ring even though I knew it wouldn't. Each step felt louder than normal, like my feet were pushing deeper into the carpet than they should. I crouched next to her again and whispered her name, hoping somehow she'd get stronger, just because I wanted her to. But her breathing didn't change. It stayed weak, slow, painful. After a while I realized she wasn't making those little sounds anymore. She wasn't twitching. She wasn't struggling to lift her head. I felt panic rise in my chest, a thick, choking kind of panic. I reached in and touched her again. Still warm but not moving. I started searching the house again for something, anything. I don't even know what I was looking for. Maybe a towel, maybe a blanket, maybe some kind of clue for what to do next. I kept walking back and forth until I reached the gap behind the sofa. That was when I saw her. She had dragged herself out of the container. She must have slipped or pushed her way out when I wasn't looking. She was lying behind the sofa, curled in the tightest shape I'd ever seen, like her whole body was trying to fold into itself. Her eyes were closed. Her chest wasn't moving. I knelt down and touched her gently. She was warm still, but there was no life left in her warmth. It felt like it was fading by the second. I remember sitting on the floor and staring at her for a long time. The house felt completely silent. No fridge hum, no clock ticking, nothing. Just a thick, heavy stillness that wrapped around everything. When my parents finally came home, everything happened fast after that. The neighbors talked. The adults got involved. The kid next door, the one who did it, ended up on some kind of list. His parents made him dig the hole and bury her in our yard. I watched from far away. I didn't want to be near him. I didn't want to hear anything. I just wanted the day to end. But the strange part, the part that stayed with me, wasn't the burying or the anger or the noise of the adults. It was the quiet of the house earlier, the way it felt while I was alone holding my dying cat. The way the world shrank down to me. The container, and the breath that slowly disappeared from her body. Years later, I can still feel that same quiet when I think about it. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that settles on you when something changes, and you know it won't go back to the way it was before. The kind of quiet that stays with you long after the moment is over, shaping everything that comes after it, whether you want it to or not. I was 7 when everything in my life shifted, though at the time it felt like it happened in slow motion, like someone dragging a heavy chair across a quiet room. I still remember that afternoon in the kitchen, the one that stayed with me like a stain on the inside of my mind. The lights were dim because one of the bulbs had burned out, and nobody bothered to replace it. The sun outside was already sliding down, and the shadows stretched across the floor tiles like long black fingers. All of us kids sat in a row at the table, our legs dangling, not touching the ground. I remember swinging my feet just to feel something normal. My parents stood across from us. My mom leaned against the counter like she always did, arms crossed, acting casual even though the air felt tight around us. My dad stood completely still. His shoulders were pulled up, like he was trying to hold his whole world in place. I remember the small details more than anything. The faint smell of dish soap, the dull sound of a clock ticking above the fridge, the cold surface of the table under my palms as I kept rubbing one spot over and over without realizing it. They asked us who we wanted to live with. It wasn't said dramatically, just dropped onto the table like another chore. I didn't fully understand what it meant, but I knew the tone in the room was different. It felt like something heavy was happening, something that couldn't be undone once we answered. One by one, my sisters said they wanted to live with our mom. They said it with no fear, almost excited, because to them she was the fun one. She let them stay up late, let them eat junk for dinner, laughed a lot, moved fast, talked loud, never said no. I watched my dad's face with each answer. He didn't argue. He didn't ask for a reason. He just nodded slowly, like each nod pushed him deeper into some place he couldn't escape. When it was my turn, I looked at him. I didn't even think at first. I just felt this pulling feeling inside my chest, something uneasy, like a rope tightening. His face looked pale, his mouth tight, his eyes tired in a way I had never noticed before. He didn't look angry. He just looked hurt, a kind of hurt I didn't know people could show without crying. I wanted to say Mom. Everyone else said Mom. It felt like the simple choice, the easy choice. I was 7 and I wanted fun and noise and bright colors. But something in me shifted when I saw his face. It was like I couldn't let him stand there all alone while we all turned away from him. I felt small but also strangely older in that moment, like I was being pushed towards something I couldn't explain. I said I would live with him. The moment I said it, the whole room felt still. I remember my dad blinking once, slow, like he wasn't sure he heard me. My mom didn't react much. My sisters didn't care. But I felt something move inside me, something that stayed for years. The scary part didn't start then. It came slowly. After the move, after the long drive to the small house my dad picked for the two of us. It wasn't the house itself that scared me. It was how silent it was. No shouting, no laughing, no slamming doors. Just quiet. Too quiet for a kid who had grown up around constant noise. At night, I could hear everything. The refrigerator humming, the heater clicking, the creak of the hallway floorboards when the temperature changed. Every sound felt sharper in the dark, like the house was learning to breathe around us. The first night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The room felt too big for me. The shadows felt too thick. I thought I made a mistake. I felt the fear rise in my chest. Not the kind with monsters or shapes in the dark, but the kind that came from knowing I changed my whole life with one sentence in a dim kitchen. I thought about my mom laughing with my sisters, about the noise of that house, the way chaos felt familiar. I wondered what she was doing. I wondered if she even thought about me. My dad checked on me often, walking softly, opening the door just enough for a line of hallway light to fall across my floor. He didn't say anything. I always pretended to be asleep so he wouldn't worry, but I listened to his steps fading away, the deep sigh he let out in his own room. Even then, I felt the weight he carried. A weight I didn't fully understand. The days grew steadier. His routines became my routines. He woke early every single morning, shaved in silence, made the same breakfast, packed my lunch the same way, folded my clothes with sharp, careful lines. He didn't talk much, but everything he did made sense. Everything was done with a reason behind it. No chaos, no mess, no sudden swings of mood, but the quiet scared me more than I ever admitted. It made me face myself in ways loud houses never forced me to. Some nights, lying awake, I would hear him walking in the living room long after midnight. Not pacing in anger or nervousness, just walking slow, thinking, maybe trying to figure out how to raise a kid alone. I think those footsteps shaped me more than anything. They made me realize how hard he was trying, how much he carried without showing it. As I grew older, the fear shifted into something else. I began to understand the difference between fun and safe, between loud and stable. I visited my mom sometimes. I saw the same chaos I remembered, but it felt different when I wasn't living in it. I saw how tired she looked even when she acted cheerful, how she let things fall apart little by little. I saw my sisters struggling, drifting in directions that scared me more than any dark room ever did. Every time I came back home to my dad's house, the silence didn't scare me anymore. It felt solid. It felt earned. It felt like somewhere I could breathe without wondering what would explode next. Years passed. I look back at that moment in the kitchen when I was 7. The moment I chose him because he looked sad. I used to think I made that choice for him. But now I know I made it for myself too, even if I didn't understand it back then. The ending to all of it is simple and clear. My childhood with him shaped me into someone steady, someone who didn't fall apart the way I might have if things went differently. It wasn't always easy, and some nights were heavy in ways a kid shouldn't carry. But I grew up right. I grew up with someone who put the work in every single day. Even when the house was too quiet, even when he was tired, even when the world felt heavy on his shoulders. I used to think that moment in the kitchen was just a sad memory. But now I see it as the moment my whole life shifted toward something better. That sad look on his face changed everything, and choosing him turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Even the scary parts of that quiet house led me to a life that kept me steady when so many other things could have gone wrong. And in the end, the fear didn't stay. The quiet didn't stay heavy. It turned into something strong, something I carried with me, something that shaped every good thing that came after. I grew up hearing people say that divorce hurts everyone, but I don't think anyone ever explained what that pain actually feels like when it hits you right in the middle of your chest. I wasn't a parent. I wasn't even close to being an adult, but the night everything changed, I felt older and smaller at the same time. I didn't have a say in anything, until suddenly I was being asked to make a choice that no kid should ever be asked to make. The strange part is that there wasn't some big fight that warned me it was coming. My parents had been quiet for months, the kind of quiet that fills every corner of the house like a cold draft. They moved around the house like shadows, avoiding each other, avoiding me without meaning to. At the time, I tried to ignore it. I buried myself in homework, in my room, in anything that made the silence feel less heavy. But silence has weight, and it kept pressing down on me until I couldn't breathe right. One night, I was in my room scrolling through my phone when I heard both of them walking down the hallway. Not together, not talking, just two sets of footsteps coming closer. When they stopped outside my door, my stomach tensed so hard it hurt. Something inside me knew that nothing normal ever began with two parents standing silently outside a child's room. They didn't come in at the same time. One spoke first, then the other, both trying to explain what was happening in their own way. They told me they couldn't live together anymore. They told me they still loved me. They told me it would be okay. All the usual lines adults use when things are not okay at all. I kept looking down at my hands because I didn't want to look at their faces. I didn't want to see the guilt, the sadness, the confusion, because then I'd have to feel it too. And then came the question. The question that sat between us like a knife. They wanted me to choose who I wanted to live with. They said it softly, but the softness made it worse, like they knew how cruel it sounded, but hoped saying it gently would make the cut cleaner. I didn't answer them that night. I couldn't. I spent the next days drifting around like someone watching their own life through glass. At school, everything looked normal but felt wrong. The halls were louder, the lights were brighter. The air felt too warm. My friends kept asking if I was okay, but I couldn't explain the pressure building inside me. How could I tell them that choosing between two people who raised me felt like choosing which part of myself I wanted to break? At home, each parent tried in their own quiet way to show me what life with them would be like. My mom cooked meals she hadn't made in years. My dad cleaned the garage and set up a space he said could be mine. They weren't fighting anymore, but that was the worst part. They were both waiting, trying not to show they were waiting. Every time I came into a room, I felt their eyes on me, gentle and desperate. They didn't need to say anything, I could feel the fear in the air. They were afraid of losing me. I was afraid of hurting them. I tried to sleep, but every night I kept imagining what would happen if I chose one over the other. I pictured my mom crying after I left. I pictured my dad walking into an empty room he built for me that I would never use. I pictured myself years later, looking back and wondering if I had ruined something by choosing wrong. That thought stayed with me like a shadow that moved even when I stood still. The worst moment came a week later. I was walking past their bedroom doors, both slightly open. Through one, I saw my dad sitting on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Through the other, I saw my mom lying on her side, holding a pillow against her chest like she was bracing herself against something I couldn't see. I froze in the hallway. They didn't know I was there, but I could feel the weight of their sadness pulling at me from both sides. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I realized no matter what I did, someone was going to get hurt. And even worse, I was going to remember being the one who caused that pain. I suddenly understood why no child should ever be asked to choose. It wasn't a decision meant for a young mind. It was a burden, a heavy, ugly responsibility that didn't belong to me. I didn't make the choice myself in the end. The school counselor found out what was happening after I failed a test I didn't even remember taking. She called me in, asked a few questions, and before I knew it, she brought in people who actually understood how harmful that question was. They talked to my parents separately. They explained what it does to a kid. They made it clear that the decision was theirs to figure out, not mine to carry. My parents weren't happy at first, but something softened in them after those meetings. Maybe hearing it from a stranger made them understand what they had been putting on my shoulders. They stopped asking me. They started talking to each other again. Not lovingly, but responsibly. Slowly, the tension in the house shifted. It didn't disappear, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. They eventually worked out a plan between themselves. I wasn't asked to decide. I wasn't forced to pick a side. When they told me the arrangement, I felt something strange, relief mixed with exhaustion. Like I had been holding my breath for weeks and finally let it out. Even now, years later, I still remember the feeling of standing in that hallway, seeing both of them in their separate rooms, each alone in their own sadness. I remember the cold pressure of choosing and the quiet relief of having that weight taken away. The ending wasn't perfect, but it was clear. I wasn't the one breaking the family apart. I wasn't the one asked to hold the pieces together. And that clarity, that freedom from a choice I was never meant to make, was the first time I felt safe again. I was around 6 or 7 when it happened, but even now, the memory still comes back in moments when I least expect it. It comes back in the quiet, in the cold, in the places where the air feels too still. My aunt's property was huge, the kind of land where you could walk for what felt like hours and still be surrounded by thick trees and uneven ground. The woods behind her house always felt peaceful to me, especially in the daytime. I loved the smell of wet leaves, the soft dirt under my shoes, and the way the light slipped through the branches. I never thought of it as a dangerous place. Back then, danger wasn't something I understood. We went out that day because it was warm, and there wasn't much else to do. It was me, my mom, my cousin who was a little younger than me, and 2 of my aunts. The trails behind the house were old and overgrown, with grass and thorny plants taking over the sides. The deeper we went, the more the path seemed to fade into the ground, as if the forest wanted to swallow it. I remember touching the tall weeds with my hands as I walked, letting them brush against my fingers. My cousin kept skipping over roots and rocks like she was playing some kind of game. Our moms were laughing at something earlier, and everything felt light, easy, and far away from anything bad. We didn't notice how dark it had started to get until it was suddenly obvious. The sky wasn't black yet, but the sun had slipped behind the trees, and the light changed in a way I still remember clearly. It wasn't nighttime, but it felt like the day had exhaled for the last time. The air cooled, shadows stretched, and the sounds around us began to fade. I didn't think much of it. At that age, I didn't understand how fast the woods could change once the sun started to drop. We turned around to head back, and that was when I first noticed something strange. The forest had gone quiet. Not just quiet like a calm afternoon. Quiet in a way that felt wrong. I couldn't hear birds anymore. No rustling, no insects, no wind. Even my footsteps sounded louder. It felt like something had pressed a giant hand over the entire forest and told it to shut up. I didn't understand the look on the adults' faces at the time, but now when I think back, it makes my stomach tighten. Their smiles were gone. Their eyes were moving fast, scanning the trees, checking behind us, checking ahead, checking places where nothing seemed to be moving. Their bodies were tense, shoulders tight, breaths sharper. They weren't talking to each other, but they didn't need to. Their faces told the whole story, even if I didn't know how to read it back then. I remember walking faster without even meaning to. My cousin did the same. Kids can sense tension even when they don't understand it. The silence got heavier with each step. The trees felt closer, the path felt smaller, the air felt colder. I didn't know what I was afraid of, but something inside me kept telling me to move. Move, move. Then it happened. A sound so low and deep that it didn't seem to come from outside of me. It felt like it came from the ground. A growl slow. Close. Way too close. It hit me in the chest and legs before my ears even made sense of it. I froze for a second. I didn't know what animal made that sound, but years later when I heard a recording of a cougar's growl, it was exactly the same. That same rumbling, that same force that felt like it didn't want to scare you. It wanted to warn you. The adults heard it too. Their bodies went stiff. Their heads snapped toward the trees on our right, the darkest part of the woods. I didn't see anything, but I could feel something watching us. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't the fear of shadows. It was the sense that something large and alive was standing just out of sight. Then, through the trees, the house came into view. Far but visible, maybe 200 or so meters away. The sight of it should have been comforting, but all it did was remind me that we were still far from being safe. Everything happened fast after that. I didn't fully understand it then, but the adults knew that running as a group might trigger the cougar. They also knew they had to get us kids out of there, before anything happened. One moment they were standing still, looking into the trees, and the next they told us to run. To us it sounded like a game, a race, something fun. For them it was the only way to get us moving fast without making us panic. So we ran. I grabbed my cousin's hand and bolted down the trail, my small legs hitting the ground harder than they ever had before. My heart was pounding so fast I could feel it in my throat. My aunt ran behind us, close enough to guide us, but far enough to keep an eye on whatever was in the trees. I kept looking at the house, as if looking at it would pull me toward it faster. The grass slapped against my legs, sticks snapped under my shoes, and every few seconds I heard something behind us. Not the cougar, but my mom and my other aunt backing away slowly, refusing to turn their backs on whatever was there. Once we got close to the house, the last stretch felt impossible to cross. My legs were shaking, my breath burned. My cousin stumbled once, and I pulled her back up without even thinking. Everything inside me was screaming just to reach the door. When we burst inside, the adults slammed the door shut behind us. Only then did their breaths break. Only then did the tension in their faces loosen into something that looked almost like pain. They locked every door, checked every window, and closed the curtains even though the sun was still fading outside. When they finally told us the truth, my stomach dropped. We hadn't been playing a game. We hadn't been racing for fun. We had been running from a cougar that had been stalking us through the trees, waiting for the right moment to strike. They said it had been watching us long before we heard the growl. They said they had seen movement in the trees, a shape slipping from one shadow to the next. I didn't sleep well that night. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like something crouching low, ready to leap. But the fear wasn't the same as the fear you get from a nightmare. It was a real fear, the kind that stays with you because you understand that the world doesn't need ghosts or monsters to be dangerous. Sometimes danger is quiet. Sometimes it hides in the trees. Sometimes it watches you without making a sound. I've been in those woods again since then, many years later, but the silence never feels the same anymore. I still love the smell of the trees and the way the leaves move in the wind. But now, whenever the forest goes quiet all at once, I feel that same cold weight in my chest, the same feeling I had as a child when I realized something was watching us. And the truth is, that day didn't just teach me fear. It taught me respect. Those woods belonged to something else long before I ever walked into them. And on that one evening, I learned exactly how small I really was. I was pretty young enough that a simple fast food run felt like a holiday on its own. It was either New Year's Eve or the night before, and my mom, who almost never spent money on anything that wasn't absolutely needed, suddenly announced that we were going to Burger King. For my siblings and me, that was like hearing we were going to Disneyland. We didn't get fast food often, and when we did, it felt like the world was finally being generous to us for once. I remember the cold air that night, that sharp winter smell that hangs in the air when the whole neighborhood goes quiet. Streetlights were blurry from the frost on the windows, and the sky had that heavy dark look it gets right before a holiday. Everything felt special. My older brother even let me ride shotgun, which never happened. I climbed into the seat like I had just won something huge. I kept bouncing my leg, tapping the door, looking around like the world had suddenly turned into a giant theme park. I felt like excited and stupidly happy over something as simple as cheap burgers and fries. My mom pulled out of our street, her usual tired silence filling the car. I didn't care. I had the best seat. And we were going somewhere that didn't involve staying home in our cramped house with peeling paint and the same old problems. The heater pushed out dry, warm air that fogged the glass a little. My brother nudged me to stop moving so much, but I couldn't. I was a kid floating on pure joy. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a sharp bang. Not like fireworks, not like something dropping, but a violent crack that punched the air inside the car. Before I could react, my window shattered inward. Glass burst into the seat, into my lap, into my hair. Cold night air blasted across my face so fast that I couldn't breathe for a second. I didn't fully understand what had happened, but my body felt it, every muscle locking up, my skin prickling like it had been shocked. My mom stepped on the gas so hard the whole car lurched forward. I felt my head hit the back of the seat. The tires squealed against the road, and the engine roared louder than anything I'd ever heard in my life. I saw bits of broken glass sliding around near my shoes. I felt air slicing across my neck from the broken window. I didn't hear crying at first, because everything inside me went completely silent. My ears rang, and it felt like the world outside the car had vanished. But then the noise came rushing in. My siblings cried in the back seat. My mom kept repeating words I couldn't understand, because they were mixed with panic. The wind kept pouring in, freezing the side of my face until it burned. I just sat there, staring straight out at the dark road ahead, unable to process what had happened. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I didn't even blink much. My mind wouldn't let anything in. When we finally stopped, it felt like the car had been moving for hours, even though it probably wasn't long. The shattered glass on the seat looked unreal, like fake movie glass. It glittered under the streetlights like something decorative. I lifted a piece and felt the sharp corner, but it didn't even feel dangerous. It just felt like part of a nightmare I wasn't fully awake for. Later, I learned the truth. Someone, a dad who wasn't even allowed to have a gun because of his record, had bought or stolen a gun for his teenage kid. They decided to test it out, right there on the street, and we were the target they picked. No reason, no warning, just a shot fired casually into a passing car filled with kids who were excited for fast food. The dad went to jail. The kid got charged for firing a gun inside city limits. People talked about it in the neighborhood like it was just another story in a long list of bad things that happen around here. And honestly, it was. Our area had always been rough, so no one acted surprised. That's the part that still gets me. The lack of surprise. The shock didn't hit me until days later. At first, I kept telling myself nothing really happened because I wasn't hurt. My skin wasn't cut. There was no blood. I had no bruises except from jolting in the seat. But when I sat in the passenger seat again a few weeks later, my chest tightened. My legs shook. Every parked car looked suspicious. Every sound made me twitch. The spot where the window used to be felt like a scar in my memory. I still get anxious riding shotgun. The position feels exposed, like I'm sitting on the edge of something bad waiting to happen. Even now, as an adult, I sometimes catch myself scanning the road too much, watching shadows, waiting for that same sudden crack of noise to explode beside me again. And the stupid part, the part that makes everything feel even more surreal, is that we never even got Burger King that night. Not then, not later, not at all. After everything. After the broken window and the police and my mom shaking so hard she could barely talk. There was no make-up meal. No small moment of comfort. We just went home, hungry and shaken, and acted like the night was over. In a joke that only makes sense in a messed up way, I always say I got shot twice that night. Once by the kid with the stolen gun, and once by my own mom for not even bringing home the food we were promised. It's the kind of joke that hides something real under it. The kind of joke that comes from someone who learned early that sometimes you have to laugh at the fear, or it swallows you whole. Years later, someone online sent me a gift card for Burger King as a joke, and somehow that small, stupid thing felt like closure. Not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me that the memory didn't own me anymore. It happened, it scared me, and it shaped me, but it didn't keep me stuck there forever. I lived through it. I carried it. And eventually, I learned how to let some of it go.